In 2002, Francis Alice, a Dutch-born artist, gave shovels to 500 volunteers in a desert outside of Lima, Peru. They stood in a line and on his command moved a mountain. Well, technically it was a sand dune, but he called the performance piece When Faith Moves Mountains. He had the line of volunteers climb the dune's ridge and shovel the sand forward at every step. In the end, the mountain of sand moved 4 inches. Scriptures of several faiths speak of the potential for faith to move mountains. It seems the act of moving a mountain represented doing the seemingly impossible with divine aid. This idea was written before steam shovels, though. The impossible has wheeled over to possible. Yet I still believe it requires faith to move a mountain. Faith in something. When the mountains and the mind first saturated my mind, I wanted to know the architect of the open pit. I needed to know who decided to go above ground. Did he or she have a vision of what the future held, of benches, piles, and an inverted mountain? I knew one person did not do this. Decades of bodies and machines have. But an idea, as a spring of water, usually enters through one fissure into this world. We credit an architect for an edifice, though she does not pour the foundation or nail every board. The credit comes because of what we call her vision, which is a romantic way to say blueprint. It is to create in theory now what will exist tangibly in the future. On July 21st, 1906, the Deseret News published an article called Removing Utah Mountains by Modern Machinery. It read, "To some people, strange things are going on in Bingham just now. The great copper camp is undergoing such a transformation that in a few years the topography of the district will look much different to what it does at present. The great mountain, which spreads itself over the domains of the Boston Consolidated and Utah Copper Companies, is to come down." How is it possible to tear down a mountain as big as those in Bingham, may be asked? The answer will be, it is to be blown up with powder. But the pyrotechnics are not all to be pulled off at one time. It may take years, perhaps generations, to complete the job. But the Copper Kings have willed that at least one of Bingham's highest hills shall be moved away. It is doomed. What powder does not do, steam shovels will. That year, in 1906, large-scale surface mining began at Bingham, though the idea began a decade earlier. In the mid-1890s, Daniel Cowan Jackling and a colleague, Robert Gemmell, stood on a mountain in the Bingham region known as the Hill. The mining industry knew the Hill held a copper deposit, but it also knew it was low grade, only 2% copper within the host rock. An interested investor sent a team, including Jackling and Gemmell, to evaluate the profitability of mining the Hill's deposit. At that low of a percentage, no one had deemed the deposit worthwhile or profitable. But Jackling and Gemmell proposed another mining approach. Their concluding report to the investor suggested the ore would be worked by quarrying or open pit methods, the overlaying deposits of waste and low-grade material being first stripped off the ore and hauled by railroad to the convenient dumping ground. They proposed building a concentrating plant north of the Oakers, with the capacity to process 2,000 tons daily. Also, work on this scale would require consolidating mining claims. With those conditions, Jackling believed that the low-grade ore could reach profitability. The investor dismissed the report, likely because of the millions of dollars required for the risky venture. Jackling, however, pursued it. Soon he was general manager of the Utah Copper Company. With monetary fuel from the Guggenheims, mining on the Hill rose to the surface in the summer of 1906. The synergy of railway, dynamite, and steam shovel turned the once termed worthless ore profitable. While Jackling wasn't the first to use steam shovels, dynamite, or rail, he is generally credited as the first to combine and apply the technologies to low-grade copper on such a large scale. Jacqueline created a new level of scale and speed. And so in 1907, the Copper Handbook wrote of Jacqueline's company, "The mining work of the Utah Copper Company is an evolution, yet it may prove to be the beginning of a revolution also. The mine must be regarded as a step in the advance of anything heretofore accomplished in mining, and opens a new and vast field of possibilities in the mining world." I had a name, Daniel Cowan Jacqueline. I read about his life. He was born in Missouri. Both his father and mother died before he turned 3. Left an orphan, he was passed between relatives for the next 14 years. He rarely spoke of his childhood later in life. He earned his own keep from an early age by driving plow teams and working other farm jobs. He initially wanted to teach and be a farmer, but one day he saw a civil engineer mapping out a city street with a transit. The precision of the craft and tools captivated him. So in 1893, he graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Metallurgy. Jacqueline was the originator of this mark. Honestly, I detested him for his work. It is comfortable to cast those involved in mining as villain. It is easy. I didn't want easy. So I sought out his own words. In 1940, Jacqueline was awarded the Washington Award, a prestigious engineering award whose past recipients included people such as Henry Ford and Orville Wright. The presenter graciously introduced Jacqueline, who then addressed the audience. He said he felt unworthy of such an honor. He spoke of his work at Bingham. "I became convinced," Jacqueline said, "that this ore occurrence, long known and theretofore considered as worthless, could be made the basis of a profitable operation if worked on a sufficiently large scale of daily tonnage. Very few others, either engineers or investors, were sympathetic with my conception. It required a matter of 4 years of almost constant endeavor on my part before the small beginning was successful. From it grew the gigantic operations of today." The majority of his remarks fell under the title, "The Engineer's Province and Obligation in Organized Society." He said that engineering is the art of directing the great sources of power for the use and convenience of man, and that the engineer's sphere is as extensive as the surface of the earth. He declared that the engineer is responsible, primarily, basically, and almost wholly, for mankind's welfare and the progress of civilized advancement. He finished his remarks by saying, "The sage who commented ruefully that there was nothing new under the sun did not reckon with the capabilities of modern engineering. The engineer's obligations demand of him both courage and persistence in seeking and finding solutions to attendant problems, because the economic and sociological destiny of mankind must rely upon his achievements and guidance more than upon all other classes or orders of human relationships combined." I finished and wanted to read him Janine Benyu's words. Imagine designing spring. I heard in his words technological determinism, the idea that all technology that can be feasibly produced is desirable and is likely to be developed and become available. It is the assumption that technology is both autonomous and has determinate effects on society. It is the idea that if we can, we will. This view seems to say that technology decides, not us, and in that acquiescence we forget that our bodies and all life are fluid with and dependent on our surroundings. I try to remember that the cultural mindset has changed. As the philosopher Bruno Latour said, the paradox of the environment is that it emerged in public parlance just when it was starting to disappear. During the heyday of modernism, no one seemed to care about the environment because there existed a huge unknown reserve on which to discharge all bad consequences of collective modernizing actions. The environment is what appeared when unwanted consequences came back to haunt the originators of such actions. I found out there's a statue of Jacqueline at the state's Capitol building. But think of something as firm as a tree, Jacqueline. Trees are miracles. Any tree, every tree. I think we forget that so many factors must fall into place. So many finicky variables must marry. Seed, soil, air, water, and sun, all in the right amount. It starts vulnerable. These are moments when all the right parties have arrived. Some moments wait for years, and others just an instant. And that moment is tenuous ground. We forget looking at an oak we can't circle with arms that it may not have been. Trace anything back, and you come to that moment when its existence was as sure as a coin toss. Things we see as entrenched, solid, and destined were at one point only an option. When all other parts are equal and ready, parties with unsettled volition decide. The lot is dropped on one side, and the choice begins breaking ground, moving against a world used to being without it, until it is entrenched, and other vulnerable decisions find themselves beaten down by the one who got there first. When that step is taken to one side, it can be adjusted easily, but take it further and further, and the return to that moment seems improbable, too difficult, impossible. Decisions grow exponentially. So don't tell me small acts can't do anything. By small things are great things brought to pass, and there are always other options. He died in 1956, 50 years after 1906. By then, Bingham was the largest human-made excavation on Earth. Daniel Jacqueline was quoted in a newspaper article as saying, he had no sympathy for so-called conservationists who would allow river water to run away to the sea and be wasted instead of being harnessed for hydropower. And he considered it sheer idiocy to let any mineral deposit sit idly undeveloped when the technology for its economic exploitation was at hand. To Jacqueline, the truest conservationists were those who harnessed the earth. He'd probably call me a fool, a so-called conservationist. I'd probably tell him to go take a hike in the Ochres. I'd tell him to walk with me to the baskets, where we'd meet the bluebird that lives at the third bend on the path.